Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, and tonight I'm continuing my read through and review of The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. As always, you can find all episodes of the show along with links to social media, ways to listen, and ways to support the show, including Patreon and the merch store, over on the website, and that is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. Support is never expected, but always appreciated, as there are expenses in making these shows. And just some disclaimers here at the beginning of the show, these shows here. First off, the words that I'm reading are from Charles Fort. They're his words and his thoughts. So, and we may not agree with all of them. So, just want to put that out there. Also, I am going to mispronounce things because names and words are difficult. They are hard. And also, there may be things that he mentions in this book that since the books have come out, science has explained. So if there's something that sounds like that to you, just keep in mind it may not have been explained at the time of the release of that book. So, which is around early 1900s, 1919, right on there. So, but anyway, with that, we can get back to the book here. Last time we were talking about, I was reading a section about material almost like silk falling from the sky. So, take care, Ricky. I see you in the chat there. Thank you for being here as long as you're able. And anyway, just talking in the chat there. So let's get back to the material here. And I left off at a paragraph. There we go. Found it. Then it's that other familiar matter of incredible marksmanship, in quotation marks, again. Hitting a small triangular space for hours, interval of hours, then from 9 in the morning until night. Same small triangular space. This is a good point he keeps on bringing up. And so many of these falls of objects, whatever they are, they seem to be almost targeted. They seem to be focused on areas, not in the way that you would think that regular weather would manage. Now, I have heard over the years of storms being picky about where they go, or suddenly changing course, or all these things, but we're not necessarily, I don't know if we're talking about the same thing there, because that would mean that they would have to just stay in one place for the whole time, I would guess, if anyone was going to say that's what they were, was storms of some kind. And he pointed out earlier when I read the last episode, I believe, that if it was a case of a storm picking up several things from an area and then dropping them again, you would have all kinds of objects. At least it seems like you would. Not just one type of strange material that is found in one area. You'd have other objects that you would think would be brought up from its surroundings, along with whatever the main item might be. So I think it's a valid point for him to keep mentioning that over and over again, because it's easy to forget when you're going through all these events. But I think it's important to keep that in mind. So let's get back to this here. These are the disregards of the classic explanation. There is no mention of spiders having been seen to fall, but a good inclusion is that though this substance fell in good-sized flakes of considerable weight, it was viscous. In this respect, it was like cobwebs. Dogs, nosing it on the grass, were blindfolded with it. This circumstance does strongly suggest cobwebs. Unless we can accept that in regions aloft, there are vast viscous or gelatinous areas, and that things passing through become daubed, I'm guessing is the word, or perhaps we clear up the confusion in the descriptions of the substance that fell in 1841 and 1846 in Asia Minor, described in one publication as gelatinous and in another as a cereal. That's cereal. That it was a cereal that had passed through a gelatinous region. That the paper-like substance of Memel may have had such an experience may be indicated in that Ehrenberg found in it gelatinous matter, which he called nostoc, a type of fungus, I believe, and parentheses, Annals and Magazine of Natural History 1-3-185, and parentheses. Scientific American 45-337. Fall of a substance described as cobwebs. Latter part of October 1881 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And other towns. Other towns mentioned are Green Bay, Vesburg, Fort Howard, Sheboygan, and Ozaki. Wow, that's a different one. Ozaukee. The aeronautic spiders are known as gossamer spiders because of the extreme lightness of the filaments that they cast out to the wind. Of the substance that fell in Wisconsin, it is said, in quotation marks, in all instances the webs were strong in texture and very white, in quotation marks. The editor says, in quotation marks, curiously enough, there is no mention in any of the reports that we have seen of the presence of spiders, in quotation marks. So our attempt to divorce a possible external product from its terrestrial merger, then our joy of the prospector who thinks he's found something. The Monthly Weather Review 26-566 quotes the Montgomery, Alabama Advertiser that upon November 21st, 1898, numerous batches of spider web-like substance fell in Montgomery in strands and in occasional masses, several inches long and several inches broad, or I guess maybe wide. According to the writer, it was not spider's web, but something like asbestos. That's a terrifying thought. Also, that it was phosphorescent. So that means it glows in a way. The editor of the review says that he sees no reason for doubting that these masses were cobwebs. Nature, 1883-342. A correspondent writes that he sends a sample of a substance said to have fallen at Montesson in Gironde, October 16th, 1883. According to a witness quoted by the correspondent, a thick cloud accompanied by rain and a violent wind had appeared. This cloud was composed of a woolly substance in lumps the size of a fist, which fell to the ground. The editor, Sandier, I'm not sure if that's right, says of this substance that it was white, but was something that had been burned. It was fibrous. M. Tsindier astonishes us by saying that he cannot identify this substance. We thought that anything could be identified as anything. He can say only that the cloud in question must have been an extraordinary conglomeration. Annual Register, 1832-447. That March 1832, there fell in the fields of Koryazov, Russia, a combustible yellowish substance covering at least 2 inches thick, an area of 600 or 700 square feet. It was resinous and yellowish, so one inclines to the conventional explanation that it was pollen from pine trees. But when torn, it had the tenacity of cotton. When placed in water, it had the consistency of resin, in quotation marks. This resin had the color of amber, was elastic, like India rubber. Never heard that before. That's interesting. And smelled like prepared oil mixed with wax, in quotation marks. So in general, our notion of cargoes and our notion of cargoes of food supplies in Philosophical Transactions 19-224 is an extract from a letter by Mr. Robert Vance of Kilkenny, Ireland. Kilkenny? I'm not sure. Dated November 15th, 1695. That there had been of late in the counties of Limerick and Tipperary showers of a sort of matter like butter or grease, having, in quotation marks, a very stinking smell, in quotation marks. There follows an extract from a letter by the Bishop of Cloyne, Cloyne, upon, in quotation marks, a very odd phenomenon, in quotation marks, which was observed in Munster and Leinster, that for a good part of the spring of 1695, there fell a substance which the country people called butter, soft, clammy, and of a dark yellow, that cattle fed indifferently in fields where this substance lay, in quotation marks. It fell in lumps as big as the end of one's finger, in quotation marks. It had a strong ill scent. His Grace calls it a stinking dew. In Mr. Van's, oh wait, I just skipped a page. There we go. Excuse me. In Mr. Van's letter, it is said that the butter, in quotation marks, was supposed to have medicinal properties and, in quotation marks, was gathered in pots and other vessels by some of the inhabitants of this place, in quotation marks. And in all the following volumes of Philosophical Transactions, there is no speculation upon this extraordinary object. ostracism. The fate of this datum is a good instance of damnation, not by denial and not by explaining away, but by simple disregard. The fall is listed by Chladni and is mentioned in other catalogs, but from absence of all inquiry and of all but formal mention, we see that it has been under excommunication as much as was ever anything by the preceding system. Excuse me. The datum has been buried alive. It is irreconcilable with the modern system of dogmas as ever were geologic strats and vermiform appendix with the preceding system. If intermittently, or in quotation marks, for a good part of the spring, in quotation marks, this substance fell into Irish provinces and nowhere else, we have, stronger than before, a sense of a stationary region overhead, or a region that receives products like this, or like this Earth's products, but from external sources. A region in which this Earth's gravitational and meteorological forces are relatively inert. If for many weeks a good part of this substance did hover before finally falling, we suppose that in 1685, Mr. Vans and the Bishop of Cloyne could describe what they saw as well as could witnesses in 1885. Nevertheless, it is going far back. We shall have to have many modern instances before we can accept. As to other falls, or another fall, it is said in the American Journal of Science 1-28-361 that April 11th, 1832, about a month after the fall of the substance in Kuryanov, fell a substance that was wine yellow, transparent, soft, and smelling like rancid oil. M. Herman, a chemist who examined it, named it sky oil. For analysis and chemic reactions, see the journal. The Edinburgh New Philosophical Journal 13-368 mentions an unctuous substance that fell near Rotterdam in 1832. And Comtus Rendus, let me make sure I got the page right here. Okay, yeah. 13-215. There is an account of an oily reddish matter that fell at Genoa, February 1841. Whatever it may have been. Altogether, most of our difficulties are problems that we should have to later develop to later developers of super geography, I think. A discoverer of America should leave Long Island to someone else. If there be, flying back and forth from Jupiter and Mars and Venus, super constructions that are sometimes wrecked we think of fuel as well as cargoes. Of course, the most convincing data would be of coal falling from the sky. Nevertheless, one does suspect that oil burning engines were discovered ages ago in more advanced worlds. But as I say, we shall leave something to our disciples. So we'll not especially wonder whether these butter-like or oily substances were food or fuel. So we merely note that in the Scientific American 24-323 is an account of hail that fell in the middle of April 1871 in Mississippi, in which was a substance described as turpentine. Something that tasted like orange water in hailstones about the 1st of June, 1842, near Nimes, France, identified as nitric acid. Journal de Pharmacy, 1845-273. Hail and ashes in Ireland, 1755. In parentheses, Scientific American 5-168. In parentheses. That at Elizabeth, New Jersey, June 9, 1874, fell hail, in which was a substance said by Professor Leeds of Stevens Institute to be carbonate of soda. In parentheses, Scientific American 30-262. We are getting a little away from the lines of our composition, but it will be an important point later that so many extraordinary falls have occurred with hail, or if they were of substances that had origin upon some other part of this Earth's surface, had the hail too that origin? Our acceptance here will depend upon the number of instances. Reasonably enough, some of the things that fall to this earth should coincide with falls of hail. Let me see here where this next paragraph ends. That's a long one. So we're going to stop there. I do just want to point out as well that here, without saying the word, because I don't think it was around yet, let me get back to Discord here. There we go. I don't think that, what was I saying? It's not mentioned here, or yet. Okay, I'm all messed up. Anyway, 4 is basically talking about UFOs, about ships in space. That's what I wanted to say. There we go. Anyway, thank you all for listening. I'll talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.